Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Heathers from 1989. And this is the winner of my March Patreon review raffle, chosen by Harley Quinn 97. Check out their Tumblr, it's in my video description. They're a cool person. Along with all the Tumblrs of my patrons, if you would like to. A lot of high school movies talk about cliques and high school popularity, and it's not exactly kind of a new subject, but I think what makes Heathers so special is its cynical and bleak worldview also has a body count, and it's very unique, cult, strange movie. There's really not another high school movie like Heathers. You can compare it to other films like Mean Girls specifically, which people did compare to Heathers. I don't think you could ever see such a fun, strange, quotable, violent high school movie quite like this one. From everything like Fuck Me Gently with a Chainsaw, Stop Pulling My Dick, Heather, and Corn Nuts, and I Love My Dead Gay Son, and countless other incredibly quotable, strange lines that seem right out of a cult movie, but have all the fun that you'd expect from kind of more of a popcorny high school film. Heathers is almost an anomaly, but also fits in with all that just as well. It's very post John Hughes, but since the new teen thing hadn't really been discovered yet, it lives in kind of a weird time in teen movie film history, and I kind of have always really loved that about it. It has kind of an infectious energy, particularly when you're young and hate high school and are particularly cynical about it. To have a film reflect that in such a negative way is quite refreshing, and I think Heathers has that different kind of high school movie energy that frankly high school movies need more of, and frankly something that most high school movies can't pull off as well. But its strange kind of unique energy is something I've always liked about it and gave it such a strong cult following after it bombed at the box office. A popular clique at Westerberg High School named the Heathers, three of which have the name Heather, but their newest inductee to their group, Veronica, is kind of getting sick of the whole popularity thing of making fun of people, of writing fake notes to people just to have them humiliated. She's really sick of the whole popularity thing, especially with her increased IQ. She really isn't really that into it anymore, and then she meets the new kid at school, JD, played by Christian Slater, and thinks he's really cool and rebellious, and as she's getting sick of having to go to keggers and all sorts of things with her friends, and after having a pretty terrible time at a party with the head Heather, Veronica goes with JD to Heather's house to make her kind of throw up because she's already hungover, and then accidentally poison her and kill her, and then write a fake suicide note, since Heather can write in other people's handwriting, and pass it off as a suicide, which then makes Heather even more popular in death than she was in life, as her and JD keep offing the popular kids at her high school as they keep falling in love and seeing how popularity has changed, but also everything staying the same and becoming a bigger deal, and anti-teen suicide runs throughout the land as everything slightly gets better, but also becomes even worse. I originally saw Heathers because it was on a list of cult movies, and I was really into cult movies, so of course I saw it in the 90s, I believe. I really liked it quite a bit. Seeing it the first time, it almost feels tense when she's going on these adventures with JD and killing these people. I almost felt like, could she get caught? Like, I almost got the thrill of it while I was watching it the original times, and then I watched it with a bunch of my friends through various sleepovers, and like, I remember people thinking when she says corn nuts before she dies, it was like absolutely hilarious, which I don't think it's that funny now, but I mean, it's funny, but it's not as funny as we thought it was. And then my wife and I watched it when we first started dating, and it was kind of like a cool thing that we bonded over. It's something we kind of could share together, and we still have the VHS right here, so pretty cool. You know, it really works well on VHS, and that's frankly how most people saw it. Nobody really saw it in the theater. It didn't do very well in the theater. It's a film I've seen a lot of times and have a lot of great memories with. I didn't really like many of the high school movies of the 90s, like at all. They didn't really reflect how I felt about high school, and I guess maybe Heathers did, which might sound disturbing now. At the time, it was like more cynical, it was darker, it was weirder, it was stranger, and that was the kind of movie I wanted to see about high school, because this kind of exaggerated goofiness that was going on with the late 90s teen stuff just wasn't really my bag. But this was something that I thought was a lot of fun and was more subversive. That's really the real magic of this movie, especially the script by Daniel Waters. A lot of his lines are just really inspired. It's a really really good script. It's really quippy. It's so quotable and strange. It's almost shocking that they get it to work as well as they do. It feels like something from a screwball comedy at times, especially like the two football players getting killed. It feels very classic Hollywood, but also feels new and strange and different. Daniel Waters is actually the older brother of Mark Waters, who would go on to direct Mean Girls, oddly enough, which is kind of interesting that this film and Heathers have an actual blood connection. Daniel Waters, he would go on to actually help write Batman Returns, probably because of the Winona Ryder and Glenn Shattuck's connection to Tim Burton. And it feels very Tim Burton-y. This whole film feels very much like in that late 80s, early 90s, very Tim Burton-inspired, ironic kind of sensibility that was very much going through a lot of media at the time, post David Letterman kind of humor. I think the script is really what makes this film. Its screenplay actually won an Edgar Award, and a lot of the critical acclaim was for the script by Daniel Waters. It's a really good script. Originally, it was going to be a 3-hour high school movie, and apparently he tried to get Stanley Kubrick to direct it. Although I think that's probably something that would have never happened, especially for a first-time screenwriter. I would honestly like to travel to the dimension where there is a 3-hour version of Heathers directed by Stanley Kubrick, because according to Daniel Waters, Stanley Kubrick is the only person who could get a 3-hour movie about high school made, but Stanley Kubrick did not decide to do it, and they obviously had to cut it down. This film, it feels off. It doesn't just feel like a studio director kind of making a name for themselves. It feels like they wanted to make a unique vision of a movie, and although it does have the quirky weirdness of a lot of high school films, the framing, especially by the cinematographer Francis Kenny, who would actually go on to shoot She's All That, which is kind of interesting, but not frankly as well as this film. A lot of the framing is really good. A lot of the cinematography is really interesting and inspired. The low angle camera shot after they kill the first Heather is really interesting. Like when they're chasing the football players, that's shot really well. The way they use fog and lighting, it's really quite beautiful for a high school movie and really different. The colors, the way they pop. I actually really recommend seeing the streaming version that is at least currently when I shot this review on Netflix. But I have to say, this film works very well for VHS. I watched a little bit of it on this VHS right there. The way the camera work looks on VHS looks really good, and it almost like naturally works for it, even though it's 4:3. I think that's probably one of the reasons it has such a resonance, because of how well shot it was. I don't think people were intellectualizing it, but when you have a film that's better shot, you can usually remember it to a certain degree, and I think that's what makes Heather so memorable. One shot that a lot of reviews talk about and a lot of people talk about is when Heather and Veronica are on that date with those guys who go cow tipping and JD or Christian Slater shows up. The way that whole sequence is shot is, it's almost like a dream. It's very odd and interesting and strange. That says a lot about this movie. I don't think this film would be as memorable without the cinematography by Francis Kenny, and adds a layer to the strangeness of the whole thing. I saw this film before Columbine, and I saw it more times after. It's interesting to think I don't think you could ever make this movie again, sadly, because I like how cynical and devastating its worldview is. Obviously, at the beginning when JD just kind of gets suspended or just sent home for a day for bringing a gun to school, now you totally get expelled and probably locked up for that. But at the time, I guess it made a little more sense. I like that this film always kind of had a dangerous quality to it. It had this subversive, like nobody really got it at the time kind of feel to it, and that just kind of adds to it. The fact that it didn't age in the perfect, socially acceptable way adds to the whole reputation of this film. If Heathers was more socially acceptable, it probably wouldn't be as special, and I kind of like that it's in a way become even less socially acceptable over time, which is kind of perfect if you consider this movie. This is really, for me, peak Winona Ryder. It's actually her favorite movie she ever made. I think it's kind of like her at her quirkiest, and it's kind of a really cool role for her to take. Apparently most people did not want her to take this role. To me, it was kind of like the quintessential reason why Winona Ryder was cool, because she'd do Beetlejuice and Heathers and then do Edward Scissorhands. She was like one of those cool 90s actresses. I think it's one of her better performances because she's really the heart and soul of this movie, and if she didn't have such a strong presence in this film and carries the dialogue as well as she does, this movie frankly wouldn't have worked. The way Winona Ryder really carries this film, she really makes it into its own and really gives it that kind of sensibility. Christian Slater as JD is interesting. Apparently they originally almost picked Brad Pitt, but they felt he was too nice. But Christian Slater, he's actually doing a version of Jack Nicholson, which is interesting because most people's criticism of Christian Slater in the 90s is that he acted too much like Jack Nicholson, and it's interesting that, like, well, yeah, you were actually right in this case because he was actually doing Jack Nicholson. Apparently sent a copy of the movie to Nicholson and wanted to hear some notes, wanted to hear what he thought, but Nicholson never responded. But I think Jack Nicholson would actually like Heathers, from what I know of him, which I don't, but from what I've read. It's interesting that Christian Slater did in a very self-aware way, and we all took it as, oh, he's young and dumb and trying to rip off Nicholson. And he goes, well, yes, he was. That was on purpose. You misunderstood it. I think that's kind of funny. But I like Christian Slater a lot in this. He is almost like kind of that early career Nicholson that was only in Corman movies, and this was done by New World Pictures, which used to be owned by Roger Corman, but I don't think at this time it was. But it also in Marvel Comics at this time. Also, I love Glenn Shaddix as the Reverend when he says MTV video games. Oh my god. I'm so sad that he isn't alive anymore because he was one of my favorite character actors. He is just absolutely amazing. Glenn Shaddix is an amazing character actor. He's probably one of the best of that kind of Tim Burton era. He's just so hilarious in this movie. He only has a few scenes, but he like makes the most of them. I mean, you can't not think of Glenn Shaddix when you think of Heathers, the kind of character actor who's there to ham it up and do it well and still be an amazing character actor. That's Glenn Shaddix. I also like Shannon Doherty a lot in this as the Heather who becomes the head Heather. She has this evilness to her. It is actually the role that got her 90210. One of the things I noticed more in this, and I've noticed it before, is the dark side of being a teen girl. As much as these girls are popular and run the school, there's kind of a very real moment with the first Heather who gets killed after she's clearly given her college boyfriend a blowjob. The way she looks at herself in the mirror, that's very dark, like just really confronting how she feels about herself. It's just like so deprecating and sad. And especially that the second Heather, who doesn't really go up in the social ladder, basically gets date raped and then plays it off like she had sex voluntarily, is particularly dark and scary, especially when Veronica, in the exact same shot while she's getting date raped, is being taken with JD off on a romantic getaway, is particularly creepy and sad. And it really shows, like, as popular and as much power as you think these girls have, they're still constrained by these gender norms, which isn't PC talking, it's clearly in the film itself, which I think adds an extra layer of cynicism through this whole thing. The whole idea that it doesn't matter if you kill off all the evil people, someone else will pop up and take its place, is particularly dark and creepy and sad. Nothing will ever get better, which I think is dark, but I like it a lot more. It's kind of the reverse of the ending of Mean Girls, where like, oh well, no, we all got past that and we learned to be better. And Heather's view is like, nothing will ever get better. We are so beyond fucked. One thing I've noticed in all the reviews from 1989 that I read, from Pauline Kael to the New York Times to Roger Ebert, almost everyone brings up that the film kind of loses its satirical bite at a certain point when Veronica isn't as interested in JD. My thing with that is I always view it as when you're in high school and you kind of just like stop really caring about any of the popularity because you're like, I mean, I'm leaving, I don't like any of you people, I could honestly give less of a fuck, so you kind of get out of it. And in some ways, just like they say in The Godfather, just when you thought you were out, they bring you back in. And that's kind of, to me, what that's part of Heathers is. I know a lot of people disagree with that part. They say it's kind of the weakness in the screenplay and the plotting, but I quite like that thing because as soon as she's starting to get disgusted with it and understand the ramifications of what she's doing, I think it's also to show people start to understand the ramifications of what they're doing with that popularity and with that social clique and with that relationship. And as much as she likes JD and thinks he's really cool, she has to admit that this isn't exactly going to work out in the end. I mean, what are they just going to keep offing people and offing people? And apparently in the original screenplay, like, everybody gets killed. Originally, at the end, the school would blow up and you'd see them all in like this prom in heaven where everyone was peaceful and it was really dark and the studio was like, there is no fucking way. I will always really like Heathers. I think it's one of those classic cult movies. There's nothing like this film. It's in a way not marketable. It's very dark and bleak. It's colorful in how it's shot high school, but underneath it all, it's just really talking about how ugly the whole thing is. It's not the fun teen movie everyone took their date to, like She's All That. It's the dark, cynical movie that's calling to mind the whole thing, and it's also surreal and like a dream, and unlike real high school, it's trying to portray high school, but it's also in this weird, strange world. It's a unique, strange cult classic. I remember quoting Fuck Me Gently with a Chainsaw to my friends in high school and thinking we were so cool. This film kind of has a darker, subversive edge that you could never really take away with it, and as this film gets darker and stranger and more subversive and more controversial, I think it shows how unique it really was, and both ahead of its time and incredibly antisocial, and how it would become even more antisocial as it went on. And as most high school films, I think, end with a great vision of the future, this film ends kind of in a happy ending, but also in a very very bleak worldview of what high school really represents and how honestly we're all sick of it. And as a person who really thinks the whole experience of high school was stupid and is glad to be done with the whole fucking thing, I think I'll probably always love a movie as uniquely dark as Heathers. So if you have seen Heathers and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And if you would like to suggest a movie that you would like for me to review in the movie review raffle, then check out my Patreon. It's the $5 and up reward, and if you enter in that, you will have a better chance of me reviewing a movie that you've always wanted me to review, just like Heathers. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.